Today on HTO Football, we are delighted to welcome Alex Stewart. The Senior Content Strategist at Tifo Football, Alex talked to us about tactics, sports journalism, social media, and what the future holds for Tifo. Enjoy.
Alex, welcome to HTO Football. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. How are you? Are you well?
Very well, thank you. Very well.
Good. You're talking to two subscribers of Tifo out of the near 800,000 now you've got, right?
Yes, I think it's 792,000 currently. Yeah. Not that I check every day, but roughly.
We're checking as well every day as well. It's great to have you on the show. How's it been since its inception, Alex? It must have been a very, very busy period for you to get to that point.
Yeah, it has been. I mean, I suppose we Tifo started as UMaxit. It used to be called. With there was an app with some editorial content built around it, and the editorial content started to do quite well. So we moved across more into that, and then Joe, who's our creative director, well, he's now the executive producer of Tifo. Decided to try and make videos, and we were already doing written material that was sort of not in the news cycle and more long form. There was quite a lot of tactical stuff, which was how I first got involved with the company. Joe just took a punt on a different format, something that he felt would work on YouTube. It started to go well. We rebranded as Tifo. I came on full time in I think it was January of 2018. And then we spent, I suppose, a good year and a half, 2 years, basically trying to make it a sustainable business. Myself, Joe, and Neil Clerk, who was the founder. And then in March, April time, we joined The Athletic, which was, I think from our perspective, it worked in two ways. It guaranteed the future of Tifo as a brand, obviously, and allowed us to kind of realize our personal ambitions of I suppose, selling the company to somebody that could sustain it. But it also opened up, excuse me, the opportunity to work with The Athletic's fantastic range of journalists, to integrate us with their podcast network. And work with that and augment it. And we're currently, for example, running the Sensible Transfers series, which we've done on Tifo as videos for quite some time. And we're now integrating that into the Athletics editorial and across a range of podcasts. So, it's worked really, really well. But yes, I mean, trying to run a sports media company of the size that we were, which, obviously in terms of the channel itself, it looks quite big, right? I mean, as you said, we're up at almost 800,000 subscribers. But really, I mean, there were sort of 5 or 6 of us in total trying to do all of this stuff. And that's really, really tough. It's a pretty savage marketplace. Trying to get people to appreciate the value of YouTube as opposed to podcasts was difficult. So there were a lot of challenges, and I think we all learned an awful lot in doing that. But we're very, very happy in our new home.
I was going to mention that in a world that we live in, where traits like loyalty and trust are not particularly always shone upon, how has that been in the last sort of 3 or 4 years or so as a small knit team?
Oh, hugely important. I mean, Joe and I first met each other when I started football writing back in 2013 when I was still in my old job. I worked in the public sector for a while. Joe was running a podcast called The Illustrated Game, where there was a kind of a mishmash of football conversation, illustrations, which I know sounds weird on a podcast, but there was a site that went with it, and singing. Joe would make up silly songs about football.
He's got a velvet voice, though.
He does have a velvet voice, and he's a very talented musician. So back in, I think, maybe mid 2014, early 2014, when I'd left my job and gone sort of full time as a freelance football writer, I appeared on the Illustrated Game podcast because Joe was living in Walthamstow, I was living in Crouch End, and it kind of made sense for me to potter over and meet him and go on that. So we'd actually known each other reasonably well for a good few years before we started working together at Tifo. And I think that sort of thing is hugely important. Seb Stafford-Bloor, who's our content editor, again, was somebody who we knew quite well through sort of the football world. And it meant that when we were trying to kind of pull together to get projects going or to get videos up on time, working with Philippe, who was our first full-time illustrator as well, who again was a friend of Joe's, you can kind of rely on each other because you're all pulling in the same direction. Everybody is working hard to try and make the company a success. And I think something like sport generally, but particularly sports online, is a 24/7 thing. You know, even if like Tifo, you're working on a product with a long lead time and not necessarily news cycle responsive in the same way that a lot of people are, it's a kind of constant thing. You know, there's always sport happening. I say that, obviously we've just been through a pandemic we are in a pandemic where there hasn't been sport happening, but generally speaking, there is always something on. There's always something to be thinking about or responding to. Online was very important for us, particularly Twitter. So again, having a presence on that and being responsive and communicative and having conversations, like it's a pretty intense thing. You know, you don't ever really feel like you switch off from it. And I think the fact that we were all friends and we all knew each other made it a lot easier to be able to do that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, from a personal standpoint, I used to watch an unhealthy amount of football growing up, and play a lot as well. And then as you get older and life takes over, that time to watch and play minimizes and reduces. And I found really useful with Tifo is that it helps me stay really in touch with how the game is moving, different parts of the world, the historical context that you add to things. So as a fan's perspective, it does that as well. You get to an age where you can't watch a match every night, for example, but I can always rely on those Tifo videos to kind of visualize how the landscape is going. Where did it all start for you? If we can rewind a little bit, Alex, you're a bit of a tactical expert. I'd like to say not to blow your own trumpet, but
No.
but were you one of those boys at school when you were 10 years old and you had the tactics board out on the sideline, or did you have your suit on when you was playing Football Manager? Or
No, absolutely not. I mean, I was rubbish at football, and I was a goalkeeper with a great deal more enthusiasm than talent. But so I went to university and did English, and then did postgraduate English. And a lot of the stuff that I worked on was about sort of seeing patterns and seeing links between different texts and so on. And then the public sector job that I worked in, again, sort of spotting patterns, looking at trends, looking at information was a significant part of that. And so I think for me, so that when the Blizzard came out, the Jonathan Wilson magazine, which I think was probably maybe the end of 2012, 2013, something like that. That was a significant thing for me because I saw people writing about sport in a way that was how I wanted to read it, if that makes sense. I had come across some really good stuff before, but I think that the Blizzard was the thing that really made me think, there is actually an appetite for a certain kind of sports writing in the UK, because obviously in the States it had existed for a while. And so I started to write about the kind of cultural and historical background of football on a blog that I had at the time called Put Niels in Goal. But then the tactical stuff came about because as I watched more football, because I was more interested in it, I started to spot patterns in player movements and positions and stuff like that, which makes sense given that everything I had done previously had involved that. The use of data, again, was something that kind of came up as being something that I was already interested in, and then just applying it to football. And then in 2015, I worked on the Rugby World Cup. Simon Cleave, who is the head of analysis at Infostrada, which is now Gracenote, hired me to work on the analytics and tactics team because I used to play quite a lot of rugby instead of football. And that was kind of the first time where I'd had real media exposure to doing the sort of tactics and analytics work that we would then go on to do a lot of in Tifo. But I started it in rugby, actually. But it's kind of the way that I process stuff. I don't really get involved in the emotional side of football particularly. I mean, as a Southampton fan, I do when I'm watching them. But like you said with Football Manager, Football Manager was a great game for me because it was basically reducing football to a spreadsheet, which is kind of what I like to do, which sounds really nerdy when you say it like that, but it's true. I kind of see football in that slightly 2D way, and people moving about and taking positions relative to each other and so on. I also found with Football Manager the recruitment side of things was fascinating to me. How do you build a squad? How do you have a philosophy of recruitment and squad building that you take through a season or a number of seasons? And I think, again, that informed the way that I look at football, particularly with the sort of sensible transfers stuff. The use of data and analytics to try and find undervalued players. Moneyball, again, was an important thing when I first of all read that and then saw it. So yeah, there's lots of funny little influences that all go into making what we do or what I do for Tifo. But being good at football as a kid and being obsessed by it is definitely not one of them.
Yeah, the rhythm in the visual videos, it's I can see that now when with your literature links, that it's so effortless, the way that things are put together and the data is put together and the ideas just join completely.
Yeah, well, it's also, and that's extremely kind of you to say so. I mean, I'm very, very lucky as well that I work with an incredibly gifted number of producers, with Craig, Henry, Philippe and Alice now as well. And their ability to be able to realize these sorts of things, to kind of take my script and my scrawled diagrams, which I do by hand, and then turn that into something that makes sense and is visually engaging. And because if I read the script out to you, like it would, it might be of interest to some people, but it wouldn't work in the same sort of way. It wouldn't grab you in the way that it does because the combination of the work and the research with this incredible visual skill set that we have in the company just kind of elevates it to something that people are genuinely interested in.
I mean, Ricky's got a little story of his own. We're talking of recruitment a minute ago, and Football Manager. You'll be impressed with this one, Alex. Go for it, Ricky.
Yeah, well, I'm also a huge Football Manager fan. I think I started playing Championship Manager 3 was my first game. My claim to fame is that using Football Manager's tactical research, I signed Sergio Aguero at the age of 15.
Not bad.
Yeah, still living off that one.
Yeah, he was playing in Independiente's youth team. I remember telling my friends this guy's going to be quite good. Didn't quite realize how good he'd be, but
no, it's always nice when you come across these people and you think, or I also find that you have. Sometimes you'll be talking about a player and you'll think, I know who that guy is, and it'll be some lad who spent 3 years in Ajax reserves, and the only way you know who that person is because you signed him on Football Manager or you came across him at some point. Yeah. It's not because I have an encyclopedic knowledge of real world football. It's from the game.
My only dark memories of Football Manager or Champ Manager would be Vincenzo Montella just absolutely destroying me every time I got into the Champions League knockout rounds with Arsenal. It was just, hat trick after hat trick. I mean, you said earlier about what you try to present to your fan base, Alex. And I heard you once on a podcast saying that what you try to do is give fans the average look at how a team might set up tactically. And this is not like, every time you watch Inter or Atalanta, for example, you're going to see what I've said. How do you find that in terms of your feedback that you get from fans? Is it quite harsh at times, do you feel, what you're trying to do?
No, I mean, I think generally speaking, most fans of the channel are receptive to the way we do stuff. I think there are two big issues with football tactics in terms of trying to present them to the public. The first is that it's impossible to know exactly what a manager has intended. So people who say, you know, oh, so and so set up like this in order to do this thing, they are guessing at that, and it's very, very difficult to be able to say that with any kind of certainty. The other thing, of course, is that every match or every team setup is different game to game because their opponents are different, and so there are different challenges posed by that. There are different things that they can exploit. So there's no point in, I think there's obviously no point in trying to be comprehensive because the video would be 2 hours long. But more importantly, and I think this is where Tifo gets some of its credibility from, is there's no point in trying to sound like you're being definitive. There's no point in pretending to know everything. That, you know, if people ask me on Twitter, what do you think of such and such a player? If I don't know anything about them, I'm quite happy to say I don't know anything about them. You know, I'm not going to rush off and do a quick search on Scout and go, oh, you know, he's really, really good, because I don't know. Like, why?
YouTube compilation somewhere.
Right, exactly. There seems to be this desire in some quarters to never be caught out, never look like you know. There are, I mean, okay, from memory, there are 144 midfielders in the Premier League who played over 800 minutes last season, right? That's one league, one position, one number of minutes played, and that's 144 players. You're telling me that anybody can be an expert on all 144 of those players, let alone the whole of the rest of football. So I think Tifo's approach is always to say, you know, look, we're presenting like an aggregate of what we have observed in a way that we think will be interesting and entertaining to you. Again, I'm not a football coach, right? We're making a product that is there to be interesting and entertaining, as well as informative, sure. But, you know, I see some of the work that gets done by other tactical blogs, like Spielverlagerung, for example. You know, a lot of those guys have gone on to work in the professional game. And they are doing tactical stuff at a really elevated level, which is fantastic. And it wouldn't work on Tifo. Like, it would be too complicated. It would be impossible to realize. They are writing 4,000 or 5,000 word blog posts that are brilliant and fascinating. But you have to pitch what you're doing at the audience who are receptive to it. And so there's no point in trying to be too detailed, too complex, too overarching. But also you have to, like you were saying about, you know, honesty and integrity, you have to be open about that. You have to say, like, basically, if you watch Atalanta every single game of the season, here are 5 or 6 things that you would regularly see happen. And that's the most we'll go with.
Yeah. It's a fascinating point you mentioned a couple of minutes ago about being sort of people now feeling like they have to look perfect, and that they have to know and be an expert on everything. You know, on Twitter, something happens, all the professors and experts come out, don't they?
Yeah.
Is that, and where do you think that happened, Alex? I mean, we're sort of touching on the evolution, I guess, of sports media now. Is that something that you've observed in society? Are people scared of looking like they're wrong, or that they don't know something?
I think, I mean, look, we've all met people who don't want to be wrong about anything, right? You know, I mean, in the context of a debate or a discussion at, you know, in a cafe or at home or what have you, it's, you know, it's not a new thing for people to want to be right or to want to know more. I think social media brings with it a performative element that you know, people are actively putting themselves out there. They're creating a Twitter bio that will say football analyst or whatever, and it seems like there's this kind of tension between, you know, trying to be honest and open, but also having this persona out in the world, which is partly there to get business, it's partly there to make money, it's partly there to gain more followers, which you do via expertise as much as you do anything else. And there is a pressure. There's a pressure to be right. And I think it's interesting. I do read below the line comments on our videos, but I try not to take them personally, because sometimes
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for a start, sometimes we do make mistakes, or I do make mistakes, be the first to admit that. But there are also things where, we've done a video, we did a series of videos last week scouting for players, and there's a lot of, oh, you forgot this guy, or oh, that guy's actually rubbish, why have you put them in? And it's like, well, no, that's my subjective judgment.
Yeah, it's
I'm
opinion,
not, it is opinion. And yes, by virtue of the fact that Tifo has the platform and the scale that it does, that opinion in some way carries some weight with some people, but it's not definitive. No, I would never profess to say that these are the only 5 players in Mexico that you should look at. Like, that's a ridiculous comment to make. I know I would never do that. So you can get dragged into that, though. You can get dragged into that kind of, well, why didn't you say this? It's like, well, it's tricky, but I think social media has absolutely exacerbated that. The availability of people to respond to things.
And in a behavioural context as well. I mean, if you're sitting in a cafe or a pub somewhere, to go and do your research for the next 10 minutes, you'd look quite obvious, wouldn't it? Whereas online, you can see that tweet and go, right, I'm going to spend half an hour watching whoever, and I can come back with a really well-informed viewpoint to make myself look like I'm an expert on such and such. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's right, and I also think that there's a weirdness, if you're with a group of friends in the pub, for example, and you're discussing who the best Premier League striker is, you're going to have a variety of different opinions. At the end of the day, no one's going to get punched for it. It's not that big a deal. Whereas the impersonal quality of social media means that those debates, which are interesting debates and worthwhile debates, and if you had them with your friends in the pub, they'd be fine. But among some people on social media, that then becomes an excuse to send people death threats or something, because you're not talking to a group of people that you know and are friends with. You're talking to a bunch of strangers who are perfectly prepared to say anything to you. It's a very odd state of affairs.
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that any media company faces at the moment, isn't it? The online interaction, really. Do you see any other challenges along the path, any obstacles in Tifo's way, maybe potential competitors that might try and do things like Tifo but better? Or I can't see that happening because it's such a niche market that you've got. But what are the main challenges for Tifo, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's always the opportunity for people to try and do stuff the way we do it. I think we have found a way of talking about and presenting football that is unique currently. And I think because we were the first people to establish ourselves in that space, in that medium, it's fine. Like, it's if people imitate us, which they have done, a lot of people will comment on those videos saying this is a Tifo knockoff. So we're lucky in that respect, that we've been around long enough and we've garnered enough positive feeling from the audience to mitigate that. I think the sports marketplace is incredibly competitive. I think there's a desire to be first and to break news, and we again are slightly removed from that because of the way that we make our product. The videos take longer, so we don't tend to be responsive in that way, because there's no point, because it takes 5 days to make a video. I think now being part of The Athletic, obviously, it's a huge opportunity for us, but that marketplace as well, the subscription model of sports journalism is being tested by the current economic climate. I mean, I'm very, very confident that The Athletic won't just survive, but it will continue to flourish and do really well, because it offers a high quality product. But obviously, with sports having stopped for a period of time, the potential for a second wave, which could disrupt things further, the fact that people are tightening their belts slightly, clearly that's going to have an impact potentially on the business. But I think if you continue to make the best thing you possibly can and accurately convey to people why it's the best thing and where they can find it, then you know, it should be robust. You know, we started making videos and writing articles of the sort that we ourselves would like to consume. And the fact that there is an appetite for that shows that we aren't alone in that. But also, I would never presume that, you know, consuming Tifo is the right way, quote unquote, to consume football content. You know, that would be an incredibly hubristic and also kind of short-sighted way of looking at things, because people do. I mean, I like a 30-second video of Roy Keane being a dick. Who doesn't?
I've already watched one this morning, actually.
Yeah, so they're there. That one, the one where Micah Richards comes into the dressing room.
Yeah.
I mean,
this one, you've got to see funny. This one. This one is a it was more than 30 seconds, actually about 2 minutes of all the best clips of Keane this season.
Okay, you'll have to send it to me.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, there's an appetite for that stuff. Nobody is. I think the good thing about the internet, insofar as there is a good thing, because I'm not necessarily convinced of that, but is that somebody can go and find, in the space of 20 minutes, they can find an athletic article, they can find a Tifo video, they can find an article from the BBC, they can find some other YouTube channel or a podcast or a GIF on Twitter or whatever it is. You know, every single potential way of talking about sport pretty much exists now. The internet makes all of that available. And so if you're somebody who just wants slightly nerdy stuff about football finances, watch Twitter videos, follow a couple of people on Twitter like Kieran Maguire and the Swiss Ramble, and you'll be fine. If you want something else, then you can find it. You know, I don't just read one type of book. I don't just watch one type of film. So I think that's the kind of democratizing side of the internet, in that it makes all of that content available, and it encourages people to create their own content to fill whatever need they feel needs filling. And that's great. You know, as long as people continue to watch Tifo, which they will do, then it's fine. And I would never assume that it's the best way to do it, or the only way to do it.
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about the future for Tifo before we wrap up, Alex. But Ricky's going to kick us off with our counter-attack challenge on HTO. He's going to put you under a little bit of pressure. Well, we'll see. It might be a lot of pressure. We'll see. But Ricky's going to kick us off with the first one, and we'll alternate. Ricky, yeah.
Yeah. So these are just quick questions.
Okay.
If you can answer in as little words as possible.
Oh God! Well, I mean, you can already tell from me that that's a challenge, right? I'll do my best.
I'll kick off with the favourite video you've worked on at Tifo.
The scouting series that we've done, particularly the J League one.
Okay, and then I've noticed you've got a Poland shirt on there, Alex. So
yes.
If there's one football shirt that you don't have and you'd love to have, which one would it be?
1987 to 1989 Southampton home kit.
That was more specific than I was expecting.
Yeah, no, it's like the absolute. It's the best.
Yeah. Okay.
Keeping with the Southampton theme, I'll ask your one team you look for, your favourite side apart from Southampton.
Union Berlin in Germany, because I've been to see them a few times, and I have a weird affection for Partizan Belgrade.
Oh, cool. At Union Berlin get a lot of traction online, don't they? They're quite a cool, popular side.
They're sadly a little bit hipster, but we made a few videos on them. But also, I have friends who live in Berlin, and I've been to see them, and it is awesome. So yeah.
Okay. Next one, Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Yeah, obviously.
That's easy.
Thank you. The first guest that said it was easy, like we all agree at HTO.
Yeah.
So Southampton to win the league or England to win the World Cup?
Oh, that's not easy. Southampton to win the league. Sorry. Yeah. That feels like a selfish response, but I'm going to
No,
go with
completely.
it anyway.
I completely understand that one. How about something like football club owners / how clubs run in Europe that you admire?
Oh, Angers in France have a fantastic record of recruiting talented young players and developing them and selling them at a profit. I really admire that. I think Norwich and Liverpool in the Premier League are probably the two best clubs for that. And Dortmund, Borussia Dortmund as well.
Nice. And, your favourite football manager formation, the formation you would apply?
I mean, the nerd response is to say it depends what I'm facing. I'd say my favourite formation would probably be like a 3-5-2 with a screening 6.
So you're a pragmatic manager then, to adapting to the opponent, yeah?
Generally speaking.
Yeah,
yes.
Jose Mourinho.
Yeah. Oh, harsh.
Ooh. And then the last one of our favourites at HTO, you've got 3 dinner guests, Alex, for some beers and some pizza at yours.
Okay.
Can we keep it tactical themed, please? Dead or alive?
Tactical themed. Lobanovsky, Cruyff, and Bielsa.
Interesting. How do you think he's going to get on next season?
I think that's a really hard question to answer. A lot will depend on whether they get a striker that suits what he wants to do and can also score goals. But it's going to be really interesting. And I think that the sort of cheats answer is they'll either Sheffield United or they'll Norwich, but it's really, really hard to know which.
So touching on the future for Tifo then, Alex, what's the next step? Is it just to try and contain where you are at the moment with the pandemic going on, or are there plans for bigger and better things?
There certainly are plans. I mean, we obviously the kind of program of what everyone's been doing and working towards was disrupted by the pandemic. You know, we were gearing up for the Euros and daily videos and tactics blogs and all manner of stuff, and that got blown out of the water. I think also, you know, we're very conscious within Tifo that we are now part of a larger company. And we're kind of bedding into that and working out how best we can continue that integration, which has already been really successful and positive. But I think we're keen to kind of get our feet under the table, I suppose, is a way of putting it, and start building that relationship with, for example, the editorial staff in the UK, led by Alex Kajelski, brilliantly. So, you know, once we've sort of established all of that, and are through this period of slight uncertainty in terms of how sport's going to go generally, I think there definitely are plans, a number of them, but when they get realised, I suppose is sort of dependent on lots of factors beyond our control.
One thing I really wanted to ask you actually was, do you know of any media platforms that have sort of joined forces with a football club, or they've been approached by a football club to work alongside them, or is that something you think might happen more in the future?
I think so. We made a video for Liverpool to go on their YouTube channel. We have had conversations with a couple of other clubs that didn't come to anything. I think that you know, sports clubs are conscious of the reach and the impact of other channels. I mean, obviously, you know, we can't compete with Liverpool's digital reach, but we have an audience that isn't necessarily, you know, Liverpool based, but will be interested in content that we've created. This is how we worked with the Bundesliga as well. So I think leagues and clubs are, some of them are getting wise to that and are smart around how they can collaborate with people. Some football clubs aren't, and probably, to be fair, don't need to be. And obviously, a lot of clubs have got relationships with one of the two big sportswear companies who have their own in-house creative teams and come up with interesting campaigns for them and so on. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely scope for it. But I can also see reasons why it doesn't happen as much as you might think it would.
We had Matt Slater on the other week from The Athletic, actually, and we spoke to him about the sort of the Arsenal fan TV toxicity debate, you know, and that if clubs get too close to their fan base TV channels, then it can create more problems than do good, really, which is something you would echo.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in that. I mean, look, fans have the right to be critical. Of course they do. The way that that's expressed, and the level of, I suppose sometimes it can just seem like shouting for the sake of shouting. And I'm not having a go at AFTV here specifically. I think that's a very online thing generally. I think what you do see is that there are clubs and leagues, and I would highlight the Bundesliga for this, who are using media companies to increase, or journalists, individual journalists, to increase their fan-oriented offering in terms of, for example, tactical analysis. So Southampton use Sam Tighe, who's a really, really good tactics writer, who's mainly for the Bleacher Report. We worked with the Bundesliga explaining tactical stuff for teams there or players. And I think certain smart clubs and leagues have realized that there is an appetite from fans for that kind of material, that fans are interested in tactics, that they are interested in, you know, whether it's a starting point of a discussion or it's a look at exciting young players in the Bundesliga. I mean, it's, you know, the Bundesliga.com, which is their English language site, has a really, really excellent range of material on it. And they're doing that because they want to engage English speaking fans. They want to get their product out there in front of people. And it's a really astute way of them doing it. And they do it brilliantly. And I think clubs will do that increasingly. I think the other side of fan engagement, you know, where it's the fans are sort of doing that themselves and then the club are or aren't engaging with it, that's always going to be more problematic, because, you know, you do get the AFTV thing, and like anything of that nature, in order to sustain engagement, things have to sort of escalate slightly, don't they? People have to be more shouty or more out there or bigger or angrier or what have you.
They almost become characters, don't they?
Yeah, no, absolutely they do. And you know, like I say, that it's absolutely legitimate that people who pay money to watch a football team can criticize it, clearly. But I think there is a format that a lot of that takes that tends to become something other than a kind of helpful discussion of whether a team's good or not.
Yeah, it's pretty cool what the Bundesliga are doing. It's one of the things on the list, really, that they are doing well, aren't they? That it's quite an admirable league, I'd say.
Very much so, yeah.
A lot of clubs that are very well run as well, and packed stadiums more often than not.
Yeah.
Great atmospheres. I went to a Leverkusen game, actually, 3 or 4 years ago against Frankfurt, and one of the best atmospheres I've been to. The away fans were unbelievable. I mean, normally they are away fans, but yeah, just brilliant. Also, the atmosphere around the stadium as well, just really quite family orientated feel, but not like you still felt like you were at a football game, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
So just looking a bit closer to home, Alex, obviously with Premier League next season,
yes.
What are your thoughts in terms of tactically? There seems to be this shift towards a 3 with wing backs that are being deployed more often than not with the top sides at the moment, particularly Arsenal, that Arteta's been using, and in the FA Cup the semi-finals as well. I think they all played a back 3. I think is that something that you see? Because Conte used that, didn't he, 2 or 3 years ago? Yeah,
that was the way that Chelsea won the league in I think 16-17. I don't know. I mean, I think 3-man defenses definitely compensate for a lack of defensive solidity. I think that's why Arsenal use it. They want David Luiz's passing range. They don't want David Luiz to only be alongside one other centre-back. I think that it's one of those things where actually Arteta, Lampard, I think these guys do want to play 4-man defences. I think Arteta wants to play a 4-2-3-1. I think Lampard wants to play a 4-3-3. But until they get their squad right, until they get the quality of players in key positions, they're not going to be able to do that. And 3-4-3, 3-5-2 is a pragmatic way of doing that, because if you've got wing backs of high quality, and there are a lot of really good fullbacks in the Premier League, then you can ask them to provide that width, but also defensive solidity. They can bulk out the midfield, they can invert and create a thicker line in the mid block. So I'm not saying like it's an easy formation to use, but I think it's a formation that is quite a go-to for solving short-term problems. I think because of the pandemic and the curtailment of the break, we will see teams using it more for that reason next season than we would have done if we'd had the normal period of time between the end of one season and the start of another. I think it's interesting, though, that you are also seeing, you know, with Southampton, sometimes with Brighton, this sort of Leipzig style 4-2-2-2. Burnley are going to continue to use a 4-4-2. So there are, you know, there's an interesting variety of formations in the league. I think maybe a couple of years ago, it was sort of looking like everyone would be going to a 4-3-3.
Yeah. The Barcelona tiki-taka,
yeah, definitely. And you do get these trends, and you know, there's a lot of, you know, for years and years, 4-2-3-1, again coming out of Spain largely with Juan Malilo, was the kind of default setting across most of Europe. And there are obviously still top clubs that use it, like Bayern, for example. But I think there's a greater degree of sort of short-term tactical flexibility to solve problems currently in the Premier League, which makes it really, really interesting. It also makes it harder for us as Tifo, because you're trying to explain a thing which may not be the case next week. You know, you can rely on Burnley to play a 4-4-2, but who knows what the other guys are going to do, you know. But that just makes it interesting. And then you can start to look at roles, can't you? So, you know, Liverpool will play their 4-3-3. So let's now look at how that front three works. I mean, actually, there was a fantastic article in The Athletic that Tom Worville and James Pearce put out yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday, on the evolution of Liverpool's front three. So again, you can start to break down individual facets of teams if they are more changeable. And that's interesting too. Like, we're never going to run out of stuff to write about.
I wonder if Tifo were around in the 80s and 90s, if you'd have had a slightly easier job with Saki and Lippi and Capello. Yeah.
But then again, you know, you look at that sort of period, what was happening in Germany, where Wolfgang Frank introducing a flat back four at Mainz was revolutionary. You know, at that point in time, the pressing game off a back four was something that nobody was doing in the Bundesliga. So there's always moments in tactics. And I think one of the fascinating things that I find really interesting and kind of unanswerable is how do these things occur that, you know, that across different regions, different countries, that certain coaches start doing certain similar things at the same time. Or how does one set of ideas become predominant? Obviously, success is part of that, but, you know, people start experimenting with something that then becomes, you know, more widely implemented by somebody more successful, and that's what causes it to permeate. Like, football tactics is fascinating. You know, it kind of spreads culturally in the same way that literature or art does, I think. Popping up in different places in different ways, and people exchanging ideas and debating it and kicking it back and forth. So it will continue to be interesting in that way, I think.
Well, that's been fantastic. Really enjoyed that, Alex. So
thank you so much for your time. No, it was really, really nice to be asked, and enjoyable conversation.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Yeah, you too.
See you later. Thanks again to Alex there for that discussion. Really enjoyed that. And also opening up about your love affair with Partizan Belgrade. Really appreciate that. If you've got any Partizan Belgrade listeners, then drop us a tweet. We'd love to hear from you. If you're not subscribed to Tifo, then get involved. That's at Tifo Football on YouTube. You can also subscribe to us at HTO Football as well. See you next time, guys.